In this video, you will be shown the process of how to complete 5 different transfers. The first transfer would be a bed swap. So this is where we will take 2 patients who are still required to stay on the same ward, but we want to swap their beds. Maybe this could be that we want patient 1 to be closer to the nurse's station, so we'll complete the bed swap. The second transfer is an intra-ward transfer. So this again is on the same ward, but this is taking a patient from their current bed to an empty available bed on the same ward. We then have a consultant transfer if the lead consultant who the patient is under the care of has changed. We also have a ward-to-ward transfer. So this could be that the patient is a sleep out or they need to go to theatre, various reasons, but we're moving the patient from the ward that they're currently on to a new destination within the hospital. And the final transfer that we'll show is transport. So this is where we will take the patient into radiology, for example. There's certain destinations within the hospital that are not seen as an inpatient location, such as radiology. And if we do require a porter to take the patient to this destination, it is the transport action that we would use to do this. Beginning with the bed swap. So I'm going to take 2 patients and swap their beds around. So I'm going to take the patient from bed 4 and move them with the patient in bed 5. Now, to complete a bed swap, the action that you will need is the icon that is green and red, and when you hover over this, it will say swap bed locations. As soon as I select this, it will tell me that the bed swap on is now available. This must be switched on in order for this process to work correctly. Now, the fact that I've got this switched on, all I will need to do is click on one of the patients and keeping my finger pressed down on my mouse, I'm going to drag that patient across to the bed that I wish to swap the patient with. It will confirm the 2 patients that I wish to swap around. So if I have accidentally done this with the wrong details, I can cancel. I'm going to go ahead and press OK, and you will then notice that the patients immediately swap themselves around between the beds. Now, this would also need to be done in real life. So once you had physically moved the patient from bed 4 to bed 5, you can then come and complete this step. Now, the second transfer is going to take the patient who is now in bed 4 and we're going to move them to a side room, bed 1. You can see that this bed is currently available, so there's no patient in it. Now, to do an intra-ward transfer, I will just need to click on the patient I need to move and drag that across into the available bed that I wish to put the patient into. It will ask me for a transfer reason, so I'm going to say condition worsened. So let's say that we need them in a side room. Now, at this point, you could choose to dispatch transport. What this would do is it will immediately request a porter to move this patient. Now, most often than not, the ward staff will be the ones moving the patient within the same ward. So I'm not going to request the porter at this stage. I'm just going to enter the transfer reason and press OK. Now, what this has done is it's basically reserved that bed. So you can see the lines going across the bed. That means that that bed is now reserved. Anybody on that ward can see that the bed is reserved because when they double click onto the bed, there is a reserved tab that will tell them which patient is reserved into that bed. What it also does is it adds a transfer icon onto the bed that the patient's coming from. So again, all staff are aware that this patient is being transferred. Now, we would then have to physically move the patient in real life from bed 4 into the side room. And as soon as this has been completed, you will then be able to come back into capacity management and selecting on the bed that the patient's come from, using the transfer icon, which you can see this action just here. Clicking the transfer icon, you can then complete transfer. And that will then move the patient into the side room. Now, if we needed to change who the patient is under the care of, this would be a consultant transfer. So still making sure you selected on the patient who consultant you need to change. You would come to the PM conversation action and drop this down to transfer consultant. Just tell you that this option will only transfer the consultant, so pressing OK to that. Now it gives a pop-up that says, is the transfer consultant date and time equal to the previous location transfer date and time? Now this has come up because I have just recently transferred my patient. The system wants to know, was the consultant changed at the same time? Now if I was to press yes to this, what that does is it instantly populates the date and time for the date and time that I physically transferred this patient within capacity management. Now, the alternative scenario for this could be that we recently moved the patient into a new ward, but the patient still remained under the care of the previous consultant. Now, it might be a couple of hours later, circumstances have changed, and we do now need to change the consultant. At that point, because the decision was made several hours later that the consultant needed to be transferred over, the date and time would not be the equivalent to the date and time that we moved the patient. So I'm just going to repeat that step. I'm going to cancel out. This time, when we're presented with that question of, is it equal, we would be putting no for this because the decision was made later on after that date and time. And this would give you the ability to manually enter the date and time of the correct time that the consultant was transferred over. So I'm going to say that the consultant care has transferred and as soon as I press OK, that has updated the consultant. Now you can double check that by simply double clicking onto the patient's bed. This will bring up the bed status, which you can see the attending clinician here, so we know that that has been updated correctly. The fourth transfer would be a transport. So now we're going to say that the patient needs to go for a radiology test. To complete this process, we would come to the action that says transport when you hover over it and request ad hoc transport. Now, because we selected the patient's bed, it should instantly populate where the patient is being collected from. We simply need to enter where the patient is going to. So I'm going to click onto this three-dot icon. You can either enter in the location, the destination the patient needs to go to, or you can expand your locations at the bottom. I'm going to say that they're going to the CT department. So I'm going to select that and press OK. Now at this point, you could enter any patient attributes that the porter needs to be aware of. If we need more than one porter, as well as the mode of transport. If there is any transport details the porter needs to be aware of, such as oxygen, for example. As soon as you've given the porter the required information and you press OK, that job goes off to the porter. So note that there isn't a transfer icon with this particular scenario. So if you did wish to verify that that job has gone off, you can come into the dispatched jobs tab at the top of the screen, All jobs that have been requested will show in this screen so long as you're in the Transport List tab. And we can see that job has appeared here. You'd also be able to check when it's been allocated to a porter using the transporter column. And if necessary, you can drop down and cancel the transport. Now, once the porter has completed the transport, this patient will still be appearing in the bed. So this process doesn't physically move the patient out of the bed. This is just a process if you require a porter. It's just a means of requesting the porter. The reason the patient doesn't move out of the bed is because capacity management is built for inpatient locations. So because radiology is not technically seen as an inpatient location, we can't physically move the patient out of this bed into radiology within capacity management. So if, for example, you were going to take the patient yourself down to radiology, you wouldn't necessarily need to do anything within capacity management. What you can do is change the attributes for the patient by selecting the bed and coming to the attributes. And there is an attribute to say patient off ward. And press OK, so that everyone within the ward is aware that the patient is not actually in that bed at this precise time. And then once they have returned, you can simply remove that. But this is based on the processes that you follow on the ward. The final transfer is a transfer of the patient's location. So this is going to take the patient from Ward 9 into a new ward. Now, there's two ways of doing this. The first way is within the patient's record. So I'm going to click the letter P to open the patient's record. Coming into the Requesting Care Plan screen and clicking the Add button, I would then enter to transfer the patient. It will come up with the task. As soon as I press Done, I will then be able to complete the form. So the main speciality is still under gastroenterology. The transfer reason depends on the circumstances. So we've got staffing needs, we have theatre to ward, ward to theatre, transfer to new consultant only. For this, I'm going to say condition worsened. Target unit, you would enter the ward you wish the patient to be moved to. And if there is any attributes that they need to be aware of. And again, is the patient on oxygen or anything that's important for the bed managers to be aware of. As soon as I press sign, refresh my screen to fully process that order. I'm going to come out of the patient's record now. But what that will have done is that task will now be on the transfer list. So you can see the patient showing here. And we can also see the comments, which is all of the details I entered when I first requested this transfer. So this is the first way of getting the patient onto the transfer list. I'm just going to cancel this so that I can show you the alternative method. Now, the alternative to transferring a patient is to click the patient and select the transfer icon and transfer patient. Now, this step would come up with a similar screen to what we had when we completed the transport. So same rule applies, how many porters is needed, mode of transport, if there's any attributes, transport details, and then press OK. Now, this will still go onto the transfer list, but the only thing we don't have is the comments. Now, as soon as the patient is on the transfer list, this then goes to the bed managers. They will be monitoring the transfer list and they will see where the patient is at the moment, reading the comments to see where the patient needs to go to. So where you have these comments that are missing, you need to make sure you update these. So you would just click into the comments field and select the icon, the three-dot icon, where you can then enter where the patient needs to go to, the reason the patient is being transferred, mode of transport, so I'll put already in wheelchair. The patient is on oxygen, for example, as well as the speciality that the patient is under the care of. So this will give the bed managers all of the necessary information they need to be able to complete this transfer. So I can see that the patient now needs to go to Ward 10. So I'm just going to change my location to view if Ward 10 has the capacity to take this patient. Now, Ward 10 does have the capacity to take this patient, but if, for example, they didn't, then I could go back to the drawing board and see which ward may be able to take this patient. We will then be able to request the porter. So I'm going to dispatch the transport, enter the transfer reason. So this is why we have the comments. So I'm going to say condition worsened. Mode of transport, again, you've got the comments to support. Now, patient will return to current location. If I was to tick this, that will actually hold the bed on the ward that the patient's coming from. So if, for example, the patient was going to theatre, we'd be able to hold the bed for them, so we could return that patient back to that location. But I'm going to leave that. As soon as I press OK, this, because I've requested a porter, it is now coming up with the porter request window. So it's instantly entered where the patient is being collected from and going to. Again, we've got the mode of transport, patient attributes. You can see the oxygen information is pulled through. I'm going to press OK, and that job now goes off to the porter. Once the job is allocated to a porter and he moves the patient from A to B, he completes the job on his device, and as soon as he completes the job on his device, this patient will appear in their bed. Now I'm going to manually complete this transfer, but it should be up to the porters to be completing this, and you can see the patient is now in the bed.